This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi. Okay, we're going to do a few psukim here in Hoshea. We're going to begin Parak Vav, Pasuk Gimel. V'neida'a, and we will know, nirdifa, we will pursue, ladasas Hashem, to know God. Kishachar, like the morning star, nachayin moitzai, whose emergence is certain. V'yavai chageshamanu, he will come like rain to us. Kemalkoish, like the late rain. Yoira aretz, and satiate the land. We explained last time that Klal Yisrael says that we want to pursue Hashem like the rain, and the Gemara says that Klal Yisrael made an improper request. The Gemara says in Masechta Tainis in the beginning that Klal Yisrael should have asked that Ribbon Hashem should be like the dew. And Hashem said, in fact, I will be like the dew to Klal Yisrael, as the Navi says later, Eyeh chatal li Yisrael. And Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz explained that the difference between the rain and the dew is the rain needs the precipitation down here in this world, and therefore it is dependent. It's dependent on precipitation downstairs as opposed to the dew, which comes automatically from the moisture that's in the atmosphere, which is at all times. And in other words, the conversation taking place here is that we ask God, when we do our small part down here, please respond in kind. And the Yibbar Shalom says, no, I will unconditionally inspire you to tshuva. Well, let's focus on the beginning of this pasuk. V'neida'a, and we will know. Nirdafa, and we will pursue. Ladasas Hashem, to know Hashem. The Mesilas Yesharim in Parak Zayin interprets this pasuk as enunciating a very interesting principle. That is, Ramchal says that one of the midos of that the Tana of Pinchas ben Yair, who's buried in Tzfas, in the ancient cemetery, but Pinchas ben Yair says in Masechta Soita, Torah mevia lidei zehiros. Torah brings to carefulness. Zehiros mevia lidei zrizos. Zehiros brings to alacrity, to energetic service of Hashem. The Mesilas Yesharim explains that when a person serves Hashem, they should do so with their soul energetic, on fire, with a lot of enthusiasm to serve Hashem. So the Mesilas Yesharim then deals with the following issue. You tell a person, serve Hashem enthusiastically, but he says, but there's only one problem. I'm not enthusiastic about it. How could you tell me to serve Hashem, to daven with energy and hislatus and with a fire and with a bren? I don't feel any fire, and I'm not enthusiastic about my service of Hashem. So the Mesilas Yesharim says that's a problem. And that is that a person's emotions are not in their control. A person does not have absolute control over their emotions. A person cannot always just turn on the switch. Okay, be happy, be sad, be enthusiastic, be energetic, be calm, be angry. Emotions sometimes override the seichel. You don't always have absolute control of one's feelings and emotions. And therefore the Mesilas Yesharim introduces the great principle, and it's a psychological principle, and the Mesilas Yesharim calls it hachitzonios ma'ireres esapnimios. The external actions engender what's on the inside. Meaning, you're not in control of what's on your inside, but you are in control of what's on your outside. And therefore, you could use your externalities to control what's taking place on the inside. So, for instance, says Mesilas Yesharim, if you're not enthusiastic about learning, let's say, I don't like learning, it's boring, especially the way the Rabbi teaches. And so what you do is, what is in your control is, you could run. So what you do is run to the shiur. Run, the second you get out of the car, run into the shiur like, you'd be running to collect the winning lottery tickets. And then the act of running will influence your inner feelings. So what your enthusiasm about learning is not necessarily within your control, but your outward externalities is in your control. I mean, sometimes you see somebody, he's davening like this, you say, what, pal, relax, what do you need? No, but maybe there's something to it, because if you daven in a way which externally exudes a certain interest and excitement about what you're doing, that will affect what's on the internal. That's called hachitzonios moireres es hapnimios. It's a concept that the Sefer HaChinuch speaks about, that in general, why are so many mitzvahs? Take a lulav and esrog. God cares. We shake the lulav. We don't shake. Hashem created the whole world. Ribono de alma kula. He created every phenomenon in this world. He cares if we take a palm and we go like that. The answer is no. He cares what's inside the heart. But a human being is not in full control of having the proper attitudes and thoughts. By doing the correct actions, it influences one's thoughts. By the way, the Chovos HaLevavos takes the principle even further. This is the principle of the Mesilas Yesharim called Hachitzonios Ma'ireres Es Hapnimios. Externalities affect the internal. Now, says the Mesilas Yesharim in the ending words of Perek Zayin of the Mesilas Yesharim, this principle is enunciated by the Navi Hoshea in Perek Vav Pasuk Gimel. V'neida'a, we will know, nirdefa, and we will run to know Hashem. What do you mean we will run to know Hashem? The answer is, what the Navi is telling us is that if a person wants to develop the proper feelings toward knowledge of Hashem, they should put on a show, so to speak. Be a phony. You say this is artificial Judaism. And the answer is, the only way to get to real Judaism is through artificial Judaism.
Even if it's phony.
Even if it's phony. Because eventually it'll become real. Now, you have to be very careful, because you don't want to be too artificial. And in in yeshiva they would say, you have to be within the ballpark of the madrega that you're hoping to acquire. In other words, a guy who, he's mamish or rosh amarush, he spends his whole day murdering people. For him to start, okay, he's going to run to the Beis HaMedrash in order to develop, it might be too far of a leap through the artificial means, but as long as you're within reasonable closeness to that madrega, the way you acquire things is artificially. Now, the Chovos HaLevavos extends this principle in the following way. And that is, the Chovos HaLevavos introduces a concept called Ha-machshava nimsheches achar hadibur. Thoughts are drawn after one's speech. Meaning, you could say, why do we daven so much? Well, now, here's a very interesting idea. If you ask most people, why do I daven? I daven because I need money, so I need to ask God for money so He could give it to me. Meaning, I'm going to shul to get what I need. B'chlal has no connection to why we daven. We do not daven to get what we need. Why do we daven? So the Chovos HaLevavos says, there are 5 main purposes of davening. Purpose number 1. The first purpose of davening is to give the neshama the opportunity to express its yearning for God. Number 2, we daven to recognize the greatness of our Creator. Number 3, we daven to humble ourselves before our Creator. Number 4, we daven to thank Hashem. And number 5, we daven, it's an exercise in trust, where we take all of our needs and we take what's called our pekel and we throw it on God. Meaning we say, God, we know that we could rely on you. It's not to get what we need, but it's an exercise in displaying our trust in Hashem. It has nothing to do with, well, I have this need, so how am I going to get it? This is how I get it from God. So why do we have to daven? Why can't we just sit and meditate? Like, in the world, meditation is very popular. You go to airports now, they have meditation rooms. So why do we have to daven? Think about it. What are we doing when we're davening? We're humbling ourselves before God. We bow down to God, displaying our insignificance before our Creator. Why do I have to say words? Doesn't God know what's in my heart? Isn't it sort of a lack of emunah to daven? As if to say, God, you don't know what I'm thinking, so I'll say it. Because if I don't say it, you're not going to know. Isn't it apikarsus to daven? So why do we have to say it? The answer is, ha-machshava nimsheches achar hadibur. What we're trying to do is drill it into our minds. We need to drill into our head, God's greatness and our insignificance and our gratitude. The only thing is, in order to think something and to feel something, the way to do it is by saying it. Your speech affects the way you think and feel.
Doesn't it work the other way around? Isn't your speech based upon what you think? Think before you speak.
Okay, so there are two things.
So you don't say something stupid. I mean...
The answer is there are many levels of thought. Of course, you can't... In order to formulate thought, you need... in order to formulate speech, you need a thought. But there's something called thoughts, and then there's something called daya. What is daya? Daya is knowledge, meaning where your thoughts become reality of your personality. Everybody believes in Hashem, but the tzaddik feels Hashem. To tzaddik, Hashem is a reality, is part of his personality. I'll give you an example. Everybody believes in Olam Haba. It's the person who feels that Olam Haba is a reality who will conduct himself properly in this world. There's so many levels of feeling something to be true. So the concept of tefillah is hamachshava nimsheches achar hadibor, that a person's thoughts are drawn after their speech. The more a person enunciates certain things, for example, Rabbi Victor Miller would say that there's a mitzvah in the Torah to love Hashem. Okay, so how do you do that? How do you come to love Hashem? So he would say, every day, say, I love you, Hashem. The only thing is people are going to think you're absolutely insane. So don't let anybody hear you. So he would say, go to a telephone booth, go inside, and make a long-distance phone call. Pick it up. Someone says, who are you talking to? It's a very important phone call. And you get on the phone, you say, I love you, Hashem. So Hashem, in his infinite kindness, he created something called cell phones, which obviously are off during the shiur, right? So, but you don't need it to be on to make use of it for the most important thing. The most important use of a cell phone is to be able, while you're walking down the street, everyone's talking on the phone. So you walk, I love you, Hashem. And now, you know what else you could do? You could send a text. You could send an email.
If you get an answer, that's the really...
If you get an answer, we need to talk. Okay? So
there's a mood-altering drug or chemical that's known in...
Mood? Okay.
It's called oxytocin.
Okay.
And
it's good stuff.
If you take it, you develop a love for the object that you're close to. So should you take oxytocin when you're davening?
While you're davening?
You have to be.
That's beyond the scope of this lecture. Okay.
We would say instead of walking down the street, you go lasadeh, or the place of hidbodedut. If you want to talk to Hashem like He's your Father, and you tell Him that you love Him, is you go to a field, and then you don't have to worry about people.
You don't have to worry about right.
People looking at you strangely that you're talking to your Creator.
All right. So there are different approaches to be able to accomplish this feat. But that's the concept of hachitzonos ma'areres hasaplimios. While we're on the subject, I'll speak out an interesting contradiction in the Ramchal. The Ramchal, at the end of the Sefer, when he talks about humility, he says, how does one acquire humility? So he says, well, look back in Parak Zayin about Zrizus, and he says, the same way, how do you acquire Zrizus? How do you acquire energy? Be energetic, and that will affect your attitude. The same thing with humility. He says, don't wear, flashy clothing. Wear simple clothing. And don't go sitting among all the great people. Sit with the common folk. And act in a way, he calls it regilus, get into the habit of humble practices. And that will engender humility. Because again, the feelings are not always in our control, but what is in our control are the externalities. So if a person accustoms themselves to externally acting in a humble way, that will influence them to actually feel humble. The problem is, that's what the Mesilas Yesharim says in Parak, I believe it's Parak Chaf Beis, the Parak about how to acquire humility. However, in Parak Chaf Aleph, Mesilas Yesharim in the parak Beveir Midas Ha'anava, he says, in order to acquire humility, it's necessary first to be an anav b'machshava, humble in one's thoughts, and only then to accustom themselves in humble practices. And the question is, that's a contradiction, because he says in Parak Chav Beis that the order of operations is the exact opposite. That first, get into the custom of humble practices, and that will lead you to humility. And in Parak Chav Aleph, he says, no, first you have to be humble in thought, and then you could start practicing the practices of humility. So the answer is that really humility is a very tricky topic, because humility, you can't immediately use the principle of hachitzonos ma'ireres es hapnimiyos. Let me explain why. Let's say you have a guy, he's trying to work on his humility. And he's saying, well, I'm going to be humble. So where am I going to sit in the shul? I'm going to sit in the back in right field, in the back right corner. And I'm going to wear shmatas. And I'm going to let everybody step on me. So you say, great, he's doing the humble actions, and that will lead to humble thoughts. No. Why? Because he's the biggest hypocrite in the world. Because if he's not yet humble in his thoughts, when he's sitting in the back in the shul in right field that nobody should notice him, what's he thinking? Everyone look at me! I'm the most humble man on the face of this earth! I am number one anav. Even Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem only wrote for Moshe anav because I wasn't there yet. If I would have been there, he would have wrote, Yankel ben Pliny is a anav mikol pnei adama. It's called ha'anavim hatzvuim, the hypocritical anavim, that if they don't really feel their unworthiness yet, they're going to be thinking to themselves, I'm too great for kavod. There's not enough kavod in this world they could possibly give me, so I might as well sit in the back because they can't even give me enough kavod.
You're humble, you're not humble.
What?
You think you're humble, you're not humble.
So the Mesilas Yesharim is saying like this: when it comes to humility, the first step is you have to realize your unworthiness. You have to have some level of humility in thought, meaning realize frailty of man. Mesilas Yesharim says, every person, as great as they are, their life is so frail. Even the smartest person is so apt to make a mistake. The Mesilas Yesharim says, even the greatest chachamim, that ta'os is more likely than getting it right. And once a person has a degree, a modicum of humility in their thoughts, then through chitzonos, ma'aresos, pnimios, through external actions, they could magnify the seeds of humility that are already in their thoughts. However, if they don't have any humility in their mind, then the actions of humility won't be actions of humility, they'll be actions of arrogance. You see, when it comes to zrizos, energy, all you got to do is do the externalities, and that will pull along the feelings. But humility is more tricky, because the feeling of humility first has to be there, and then you could use externalities to water that feeling. Okay. Let's continue, but first, let me tell you what the Gemara says about this pasuk of Neida v'nirdefa ladasas Hashem. So Gemara in Brachos on Daf Vav. The Gemara says, from this pasuk we learn Amar Rabbi Chelboi, Amar Rav Huna, Hayotzei mi beis hakneses. When you leave shul, al yafsia psia gasa. Don't take big steps. Basically, don't run out of shul. You ever see people? V'nemar v'haya Hashem l'melech al kol ha'aretz. By the time echad, he's already in his car. Now, some people think that Aleinu Shabeach is tfilas hadarach. No, Aleinu Shabeach.
He does it slowly.
He does it so. So says the Gemara, don't take big steps out of shul. Says Amar Rabbi, lo yamar l'meifach. That's on the way out. Aval l'meyal, but on the way in, mitzvah l'mirhad. It's a mitzvah to run. Shenemar, nirdefa ladas es Hashem. You should pursue to know Hashem. Meaning, Meaning, you should pursue knowledge of Hashem. Run, literally, when you come to a shul, you should literally walk fast or run. Fine, that's what we learned from this pasuk. Weiter. Says the pasuk, Ma'aseh lecha Ephraim. What can I do for you, Ephraim? Pasuk Daled. Ma'aseh lecha Yehuda. What can I do for you, Yehuda? V'chastechem, your kindness, ka'anan boiker, like the clouds of the morning. V'chatal, and like the dew, mashkim hoylech, that leaves early in the morning. Meaning, the Navi Hoshea is telling us, what can I do for you, Ephraim? What can I do for you, Yehuda? Your kindness is like the clouds of the morning, and like the dew that dissipates early. Says Rashi, look in Pasuk Daled, Ma'aseh lecha. What could I do for you? Look at Rashi. What can I do for you? Mipnei midas hadin. What can I do when the attribute of strict justice is looming over you? Eich oitzi mishpatecha la'ar. How can I bring out your judgment to light? Meaning what Rashi is saying is, the Rebbe Shalom says, when the midas hadin is prevalent, it will be very difficult for me to give you a good judgment. Why? V'chastechem kanan ba'ikar. Your kindness is like the clouds of the morning. Kol toivaschem, all of your goodness, v'tzidkaschem, and your righteousness, eino klum, is nothing. Why is it nothing? Look in the Malbim. Ma'aseh, says the Malbim, Ata Ephraim, v'chein Ata Yehuda, Ma'aseh lecha v'chastechem kanan ba'ikar. Says the Malbim, Haloi ha'ikar asher Hashem dorish mimcha. The main thing that God asks of you, who asois mishpat, is doing justice, v'yavas chesed, and kindness. She'ikar hu sheyaseh chesed and mabriyos. The main thing is to do kindness with creation, with people. V'gam b'chesed nichlu ha-mitzvahs she'osim bein adam l'makom. Chesed includes those mitzvahs that a person does between him and Hashem. Mitzad ha-chasidus, out of saintliness, shenikram taras chesed. But abel chastechem hu doimer ka'anan boiker. But your kindnesses are like the clouds in the morning. Shebiz royach hashemesh, when the sun shines, yaleh ha'anan, the clouds rise, v'yispazer, and they scatter, u'meraveh, lo yora eso adama, and they do not satiate the land. Ve'ich tevak sheyava kageshem lachem. How do you expect me to be like rain? Ve'in geshem b'lo yanan. There's no rain without clouds, and the clouds of the morning will not create rain. Basically, Hashem is saying that your kindness is unworthy, is not worthwhile, is not substantial. By the way, there's another Gemara on this pasuk. It's a Gemara in Tainus on Daf Vav Amud Beis, I think. The Gemara says, the Gemara, Hani the Amar, Amar Abaye, that when it rains in the morning, it could still be a curse of Atzaras Hashemayim. Hashem says that if you do the wrong things, if you serve Avodah Zarah, I'm going to withhold the heavens. I'm going to stop the heavens from producing rain. Says the Gemara, even if it rains in the morning before Shachris, it's still considered a curse. God has still restrained the heavens. Why? The Amar Yehuda bar Yitzchak, Hani Anoni Ditzafra, clouds in the morning, Les Behu Meshasha, have no substance to them. The Chsiv, Ma'aseh lecha Ephraim, what could I do for you, Ephraim? Ma'aseh lecha Yehuda, what could I do for Yehuda? V'chastechem ka'anan boiker, your kindness are like the clouds in the morning. Okay, we're going to hold it over here. I'm going to share with you something on the upcoming Yom Tov.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.